He dried my wet hair with a towel and spoke cautiously. You are the
first person I've ever met who suits me as well as you do.
a new 8-year-old cleaner and on the bed of a chaebol chairman's villa. With trembling hands, I unbuttoned his shirt, and the moment his heavy, firm chest touched my palm, my heart felt like it would burst. We made love. It was astonishing. I realized the rumors that the former madam couldn't handle it were true, and I couldn't hold back my breath as I let out a gasp. Is it okay for something like this to happen to me at my age? Before the story starts, please subscribe and like. That day, too, the alarm went off at 5 a.m. as I threw off the covers and sat up. My lower back ached. I fumbled in the darkness to turn on the light and stood in front of the sink. The face in the mirror seemed to look older than yesterday. As I washed my face with cold water, my eyes fell on the memorial portrait on the shelf. My husband was smiling. I opened the front door muttering, quote, "I'll be back," to someone who passed away 6 months after being diagnosed with stomach cancer 7 years ago. I didn't even know when I started saying this greeting. The walk to the bus stop was still pitch black. Under the streetlight, white steam rose from my breath, and the tip of my nose felt heavy. I stood among the people waiting for the bus at the same time and place. Even though I had seen their faces every day for 7 years, no one had ever spoken to me. When I sit in the very back seat of the bus, my face is reflected in the window. Today, that face looked unusually small, so I turned my head to see a young couple sitting side by side in the seat opposite me. Watching the woman dozing off with her head resting on the man's shoulder, I felt a lump in my throat for no reason and turned my gaze to the window. When I arrived at the Gangnam office building, I stopped by the tool room in the basement first. My knuckles ache as I take out the detergent for the rag bucket and wash them on the cart. Since my joints are like this every winter, wearing 2 layers of gloves has become a habit. Boots has become a habit. When Rob started kneeling on the marble floor, the sound of arriving employees' shoes whizzed overhead, and no one even glanced at the Mr. Mawson mopping the floor. Mr. Moore's floor. When lunchtime arrived, I slumped down on the emergency stairs at the back of the building and tore open a bag of triangular kimbap. Just then there was a thud as someone sat down next to me. "Yoon son, eat that again today. Do you think your stomach is as full as mine?" It was Mi-sun. 3 years older than me, she was my only friend who worked as a cleaner in the same building and practically the only person I opened up to. She would smile wryly while shaking the cup of ramen in her hand, and that smile always gave me a little boost of energy. Mi-sun slurped her ramen and said, I wish I could open a tteokbokki place instead of mopping mitsa." It was something she said out of habit, but back then I just laughed it off. Mi-sun blew on the broth and asked slyly, "Call me over here. Let's grab a meal sometime." I stopped picking up my spoon mid-air. Whenever the topic of my son came up, my mouth would go dry, and I would always get stuck, not knowing how to start. When I called, he said he was busy and would call later. It seemed like he was also mindful of my sister-in-law's reaction. Mi-sun sighed and tapped my shoulder, but I didn't ask any further questions. I was grateful for that. When I returned home from work, the first thing I did was turn on the front door light. The moment the light came on, I saw the empty studio apartment all at once, and every time that happened, I felt a sinking sensation in my heart. I turned on the TV and opened the refrigerator. There was a single food container sitting there all alone, and when I lifted the lid, the stir-fried anchovies I had made 2 days ago were completely dried out. After grabbing a quick dinner, I picked up my phone. I stared at my son's name for a long time before pressing the call button. It's Mom. Let's have dinner sometime this weekend." "Mom, I'm in a meeting right now. I'll call you later." After the call hung up, the phone screen went black. I sat there for a while staring at my reflection, and the ticking of the clock seemed unusually. When I lie under the covers, the left side feels empty. Even when my husband was alive, I wasn't particularly happy, but At least I had the sound of his breathing beside me. Now that even that breathing is gone, I would just stare up at the ceiling until it passed 2 or 3 in the morning before I could finally close my eyes. 7 years ago came to mind. My legs felt weak when the doctor shook his head in the hospital hallway. Why? At the funeral, I was holding his hand tightly, but I didn't know if I should cry or hold back my tears, so I just stared blankly. All my husband left behind was the security deposit for a small villa and credit card bills, and from that day on, I erased the word love from my vocabulary. I thought I had gotten used to being alone, but I guess that wasn't the case. I pulled the blanket up to my chin and closed my eyes. The 5 a.m. alarm went off again. I boarded the same bus and I knelt in the lobby of the same building to mop the floor. But today was somehow different. Beyond the glass doors of the lobby, a large black sedan had driven there, and people in suits were bustling about. As I looked up while wringing out a mop, I saw an elderly gentleman in a wheelchair sitting alone on a sofa in one corner of the lobby. Dressed in a neat suit with elegant silver hair, he stood out remarkably, quietly despite the surrounding commotion. Who is that person? I didn't know then. I had no idea that he would turn my life upside down completely. That day, I ended up working late. It took me an extra hour to clean up a spot in the 3rd floor conference room, where coffee had been spilled. When I returned to the supply room with a mop, the building lobby was almost empty. Only a security guard was standing near the entrance, and the empty marble floor gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Just then I heard a faint sound in front of the elevator. I turned my head to see the elderly gentleman in the wheelchair reaching out to press a button, but his fingers kept hitting thin air, perhaps because the angle wasn't right. It was the gentleman I had seen in the lobby this morning. He had a brace wrapped around his ankle, and the coat he was wearing over his suit had slipped down halfway. There was no one around who appeared to be a secretary or an attendant. I wonder if I hesitated for about 3 seconds. As I walked, I said, "Sir, let me help you," and he turned his head to look up at me. Cat. The moment our eyes met, his impression was vivid. Beneath his silver hair, his eyes were deep and his features were sharp. Despite his age, his back was slender and his shoulders broad. So my first thought was that a wheelchair didn't suit him. "Oh, thank you." His voice was low and calm, because everyone had left. After pressing the elevator button and pushing the wheelchair inside, I asked which floor it was, and he told me it was the underground parking lot. While escorting him to the parking lot, he laughed shyly, saying he had injured a ligament and that this was the result of telling his secretaries to go ahead first, and I laughed along with him. A driver ran out in front of a large black sedan, and before getting in, he turned back to me and bowed his head. "What is your name?" "Kim Yoon-sun. I work as a cleaner in this building." "I am Park Ji-hoon." I was truly grateful to you, Yoon-sun. After the car left, I was alone in the empty parking lot when the scent remaining on your coat began to waft gently. It wasn't your old fume, but a clean scent like soap. The following evening, you were in the lobby again. This time you were sitting on a sofa using crutches instead of a wheelchair, and when I passed by holding a mop, you raised your hand to greet me first. You were sitting in the lobby at the same time the next day, and the day after that as well. Your secretaries must be there, so why are you always alone? At the time, I didn't realize that you were deliberately sending your secretary ahead and staying in the lobby. On the day I recovered, you stood up using your crutches and said, "Yoon-sun, I'd like to buy you a cup of coffee out of gratitude. Would that be all right?" I held out my hand. "Oh, it's fine." You thought for a moment, then asked, "Then how about we each have a can of coffee on the rooftop?" At those words, I burst out laughing without realizing it, and nodded, and the wind on the rooftop was cold, but the sky was high. We sat side by side on the bench sipping canned coffee from the vending machine when he cautiously opened his mouth and I lost my wife 3 years ago. His hand stopped while I was brewing the coffee. As I remained silent for a moment, he added, quote, You must have been surprised to hear this so suddenly. It's because there is no one to talk to these days. My chin began to ache and words came out of my mouth as well. Me too. It's been 7 years. After that single sentence came out, we were both silent for quite a while. The wind brushed against the rooftop railing, and the sun was setting behind the forest of buildings in the distance. Just sitting there quietly gave me the feeling that we were connected in some way, and it had been a long time since I felt this way. After he finished his coffee, he spoke quietly. Yoon-sun, may I come up again tomorrow? Yes. I don't know why that answer came out so quickly. That day, after work, I called Mi-sun from home. Sister, the one who injured his ligament, he had coffee on the rooftop today. Mi-sun's voice suddenly rose an octave. Oh my Yeon-seon, isn't that gentleman the building's chairman by any chance? I heard from security manager Kim yesterday that the chairman hurt his ankle and is using a wheelchair. The thought that the chairman was the building owner made my mind go blank. Since he used the VIP entrance, I had never seen his face, but it turned out he was using the regular lobby elevator due to a ligament injury. I had called him Sir, Mechagnu. I had pushed his wheelchair in. My face burned with embarrassment, and I pulled the blanket over my head. The next day, I went to work and deliberately changed the cleaning order. I thought that if I finished the lobby first and went upstairs, I wouldn't run into him. However, in the afternoon, as I was coming out of the tool room after emptying a bucket, my feet in my tracks in front of the stairs leading to the rooftop, could he have come up again today and been waiting? I shook my head vigorously and turned around, but my heart sank again when I saw his back as he sat alone on a bench through the glass of the rooftop door. His broad shoulders looked particularly lonely in the sunlight. He is the chairman, so why is he sitting there all alone like that? That image of his back wouldn't leave my mind. After avoiding him for 2 days, on the morning of the 3rd day, as I was closing the lobby floor, the sound of crutches approached. When I looked up, Mr. Ji-un was there. Ms. Yoon-sun, why haven't you been coming up lately? I tightened my grip on the hand that had handed me the mop. My face flushed and I stammered, I didn't know you were the chairman. I called you, sir, and even pushed your wheelchair in. At that, Mr. Ji-un looked down at me in silence for a long time. Then, leaning on his crutches, he smiled slowly and said one thing. I liked the time I spent drinking canned coffee with you, Miss Yoon-sun. Whether you call me chairman or not, please just call me Ji-un. The hand holding the mop trembled. I didn't know what to say, but the eyes of that man, who looked like a crotch, seemed so desperate. That night, lying under the covers, I looked up at the ceiling. Please call me Ji-un. That voice lingered in my ears and wouldn't fade away, and a corner of my heart began to pound, which I couldn't suppress. My heart racing at this age. I must be crazy. I clutched the blanket, tightly wondering how I would face him at work tomorrow, but at the same time a slight thought of wishing tomorrow would come quickly began to surface inside me. The rooftop canned coffee had been going on for a week. Every evening around 5:30, Mr. Ji-un would be sitting on the bench first, and when I went, after putting the mop in the tool room, 2 cans would be placed side by side in front of the vending machine. At first, the fact that he was the chairman was so overwhelming that I couldn't even speak properly. But after about 3 days, just having him sit next to me became comfortable. However, there was one thing that bothered me. There was a time when Mr. Ji-hoon looked at my hand while handing me the canned coffee, and his gaze lingered briefly on my rough knuckles. He didn't say anything, but I quickly put my hands back in my pockets That night at home I took out some hand cream and applied it only to put it back down, wondering why I was even using it. It was about the 10th day that the crutches disappeared. Ms. Ji-eun walked up to the rooftop on her own 2 feet. Although her gait was slow, her posture was steadfast. She said she swims every morning at dawn, and I thought to myself that her body's recovery speed was extraordinary. Yeah. That day, as soon as we sat down on the bench, Mr. Ji-hoon spoke up. Ms. Yoon-sun, now that your ankle is fully healed, I'd like to treat you to a meal. I suppose that might be a bit of a burden, right? I waved my hand dismissively. Oh my, Mr. Ji-hoon. The chairman asked me to treat you to a meal. Ms. June looked at me silently without smiling. I'm just saying this because I'm grateful. When I got home and called Ms. Mi-sun, she burst out laughing, bursting. Hey, a chaebol chairman is offering to treat you to a meal. You're a fool to refuse, I said. But when I mentioned I had nothing to wear, Ms. Mi-sun made a huge fuss saying, search through my closet after work tomorrow. If you really can't find anything, I'll lend you mine. In the end, I lingered in front of the closet for 30 minutes. I took out the cleanest navy blouse and black pants to put on, and when I looked in the mirror, no matter how I tried, I just looked like a cleaning lady. I took out my lipstick and put it back in 3 times before finally applying a light shade once. The face in the mirror looked unfamiliar, so I rubbed my lips with my palm and eventually just walked out like that. The traditional Korean restaurant in Gangneung was different. When I opened the wooden gate and stepped inside, a stone path was laid out, and a staff member dressed in a hanbok bowed to guide me. There were no prices on the menu. It was my first time at a restaurant without prices, so my hands were trembling, and I put the menu down. Ji-eun must have noticed this as she comfortably ordered by saying to the staff, 2 set meals, please. While waiting for the food to arrive, Ji-eun began to tell her story. When she mentioned starting out as a manual laborer at a construction site, I put down my chopsticks. Carrying bricks and mixing cement, she eventually became a site manager, and after winning a small construction project, she managed to get an office. I realized this is someone who started from scratch. It felt like a heavy weight was being lifted from the corner of my chest. It felt as though I could hear the sound of cracks forming in the invisible glass wall separating Ji-eun and me. Towards the end of the meal, Ji-eun put down his spoon and spoke quietly. Since my wife left, sitting alone at the large dining table in the evening feels suffocating. What good is money if there is no one to tell when I'm back? The inside of my throat tightened, because that was my story too. My nose stung as I pictured myself muttering I'm back toward the empty entrance of an empty studio apartment. Oh, Tim. As we left the restaurant, a breeze of autumn brushed against my cheek. Ji-eun asked, should I call a taxi for you? But I shook my head and I want to walk a bit. The alleyway we walked side by side was quiet, and the street lights traced circles across the path. After walking in silence for quite a while, I spoke first. Ji-eun, why are you so kind to someone like me? Ji-eun stopped walking. The streetlight hung diagonally across his turned face, and looking down at me from beneath that light, he spoke slowly. Yoon-sun, when I'm with you, I feel like I'm not the chairman, but just a human being. Is that not allowed? My heart pounded, as if it had stopped for a beat. I stood there, unable to answer, when old stone steps appeared at the end of the alley. The moment I stepped onto the first step to go down, my shoe heel caught in a crack in the stone. As I leaned forward and let out a short cry, a broad hand grabbed my waist and pulled me closer. My back touched Ji-eun's chest. It was solid, a thickness that was hard to believe belonged to a 67-year-old, selecter than my 30-year-old son's chest spread across my entire back, and the strength emanating from the arm wrapped around my waist was no less than that of a young person. It felt as if I could feel Ji-eun's heartbeat behind me was beating fast as he is nervous too. I turned around, and Ji-eun's face was right in front of my nose. The streetlight pooled on her eyes, and as I looked, I couldn't breathe. In 3 or 5 seconds, the sensation shifted from the hand wrapped around my waist, penetrating my clothes and spreading to my skin. Jian slowly withdrew her hand first and Archie asked, "Are you okay?" Yes. Thank you." I stammered and took a step back, but I couldn't stop the heat rising all the way to my ears. The handprint left on my waist felt as hot as a red burn, and the firmness of the chest that had touched my back wouldn't fade from my mind. Ji-yoon called a taxi for me, and before getting in, she said I had a great time today, Yoon-sun. I just nodded and got in, but Ji-yoon got in with me. "I'll take you all the way home." I held out my hand to say it was okay, but Ji-yoon was already telling the driver to start driving. As the taxi sped off, the streetlights in the alley passed one by one, and sitting side by side in the narrow back seat, we were so close that our shoulders were almost touching. I pretended to look out the window, but my attention was entirely focused to the side. Ji-yoon's hand rested on the seat, and every time the street light passed by, the knuckles would appear and disappear and disappear. It was a broad, thick hand, the very same hand that had pulled me by the waist earlier. Why do I keep looking only at his hand? Just as I tried to turn my head, the taxi went over a speed bump. As my body tilted slightly, the back of my hand landed on the back of Ji-yoon's. Startled, I tried to pull my hand away, but Ji-yoon gently wrapped his hand around mine first. I thought I stopped breathing. Warmth spread between my fingers, and I couldn't believe that at this age, such body temperature could feel so unfamiliar and hot. I should have pulled my hand away, but I couldn't. No, I didn't want to. Ji-yoon held my hand without a word, and I was held in silence to Uhitawiya. The night of Seoul passed by outside the window, with the streetlight repeatedly settling on and disappearing upon our connected hands. That light flickered like a heartbeat. Jian's thumb slowly stroked the back of my hand. Very slowly, very carefully. That small movement felt like an electric current running through my entire body. The back of my throat tightened and tears welled up in my eyes. 4 and 7 years, no one had ever held my hand like this. When the taxi stopped in front of my house, Ji-yoon slowly released his hand. Feeling the warmth slipping away, I instinctively clenched my fingers. Angie saw this and smiled slightly. Malu. "Yoon-sun, are we meeting again tomorrow?" "Yes." I got out of the car and stood in front of the front door for a long time. I could feel the warmth remaining in my palm slowly cooling, but I didn't want to lose it, so I clenched my fist tightly. When I arrived home, I called Mi-sun, and "Honey, I almost fell today, but that person caught me." But my chest, no. That's not it, not my heart. I'm hanging up. Mi-sun shouted, "What? What do you mean? Don't hang up." "What kind of chest?" But I hung up the phone just like that. I lay under the covers and looked up at the ceiling. It felt as though the warmth of the hand I held in the back seat of the taxi still lingered in my palm, and the firm sensation of his touch on my back kept coming back to me. To think I was trembling like this at this age, feeling something that had been dormant for 7 years since my husband left begin to flicker, I repeatedly closed and opened my eyes. How could I face him when I go to work tomorrow? Yet, despite being scared, a quiet wish for tomorrow to come quickly rose from a corner of my heart. The waist where Ji-yoon's hand had touched that night, and the palm I had held in the taxi remained hot until dawn.
Yeah?
Over the next week, I met Ji-yoon 3 more times. While drinking canned coffee on the rooftop bench, Ji-yoon asked if we could stay until sunset, so we sat side by side and gazed for a long time at the sky, the sky turning orange. Something had changed since the day he held my hand on the stairs. Whenever our eyes met, I found myself turning my head away first. It was around that time that Mi-sun noticed. I was sitting on the emergency stairs, eating gum during lunchtime, when Mi-sun plopped down next to me and poked my side with her elbow. What? Have you put anything on your face lately? You look so radiant. What are you talking about? I didn't put anything on. Mi-sun lowered her voice sharply and leaned her head closer. I heard. He said den Jan Sturmenkool every day at 5 a.m. and hikes bekanst. On weekends, week. I listened nonchalantly while slurping the ramen broth. But Mi-sun moved even closer. He says he's 67, but Manager Kim says he has the stamina of someone in their 50s. He said he swims back and forth faster than the younger people. At those words, I recalled the firmness of the chest that had touched my back when I almost fell down the stairs. I pretended to eat my ramen while feeling the rims of my ears burn. Mi-sun went a step further. After surveying her surroundings, she spoke almost in a whisper. And you know, they say the former madam told a close friend when she was alive that the chairman was so vigorous she couldn't handle him. He said it was too hard every night and dropped her chopsticks, making a loud clanging sound on the stairs. Sister, don't say things like that. Why are you interfering with someone else's private? Mi-sun grinned and tapped my knee. Hey, I was talking about breasts the other day. When did I ever? My voice got louder, causing another cleaner on the floor above to peek their head out, and I quickly shut my mouth and buried my face in the ramen broth. Even as I cleaned all afternoon, Mi-sun's words wouldn't leave my ears. I tried shaking my head vigorously while filling a bucket with water, but I couldn't help the thickness that had touched my back on the stairs and the strength of the arm that had wrapped around my waist keep coming back to life on my flesh. You say the former madam couldn't handle him. What on earth does that mean? I felt angry at myself as I wrung out the mop. What was a 58-year-old cleaner thinking? That Saturday, I received a call from Ji-un. Yoon-sun, do you want to come pick it up? There's a nice place on the West Coast. I held the receiver for a long time, unable to say a word before finally saying I'll think about it and hanging up. Isn't this a date? Shouldn't I be doing this? I paced back and forth in the room alone, feeling sweat soaking into the soles of my feet. When I called Mi-sun, I was so frustrated I could barely breathe. Yoon-sun, are you stupid? A chaebol chairman is going to pick it up and sleep here, and you're going to refuse? Say you're coming right now. But Annie, I was trying to do this. Mi-sun cut me off. What do you mean, a little? How many times in a life does something like this happen? In the end, I sat in the passenger seat of Ji-un's black sedan on Sunday morning. A faint scent of wood wafted from the leather seats, and because I was so nervous that I fastened my seatbelt incorrectly, twice Ji-un smiled and fastened it for me herself. When her hand came close, it felt like my heart was rising to my throat. As we drove on the highway, Ji-un turned on the radio. A song that was popular when I was young started playing. Do you know this song? I asked. Ji-un replied, isn't it a song of our generation? And lightly sang along. Before I knew it, my lips moved along, and we ended up singing a verse together. We burst into laughter. I couldn't remember the last time I laughed like this. When we arrived at the seaside, in Seoe, the sunset was spreading red over the ocean. We stood side by side, gazing at the horizon, as the salty wind brushed against our cheeks and scattered our hair. Looking out at the sea, Jun-sun, standing before the sea makes it clearer. When I'm by your side, I'm not the chairman, I'm just Ji-un. It struck me much deeper than when I had heard similar words in the alleyway. We went into a street stall and poured ourselves a glass of soju. Clams were opening their shells on the grill, and I could see Ji-hoon's face through the hazy steam. As the alcohol kicked in, words I usually couldn't bring myself to say flowed out. My husband left behind debts. After the funeral, that was left was credit card debt and the security deposit. I went to work every dawn until Jae-hyuk graduated from college, but after he got married, we gradually drifted apart. Ji-un put down his soju glass and listened quietly. He didn't interrupt a single word or nod his head. He just looked into my eyes as he listened. When I finished speaking, Ji-un spoke quietly. Yoon-sun, you have done more than enough. My nose stung and my eyes welled up with tears. I had never heard words like that in my life. I lowered my head while stirring the clams with a spoon, and as a tear fell onto the table, it made a small drip. We were walking from the street food stall to the parking lot. As I got into the car and closed the door, the sound of the waves faded away, and the car fell silent. I didn't start the engine. Jiyeon looked at me and spoke softly. I just want to stay like this for a little while. In the dark parking lot, only the sound of the waves could be heard from afar. Jiyeon slowly reached out and placed his hand on mine. I was startled, but I couldn't pull my hand away. It was a large, warm hand with strength in every joint. Misun's words brushed past my ears, and my face flushed. My eyes flushed. Ji-eun, who said the former madam couldn't handle me, gently wrapped his hand around mine. As he wedged his fingers between mine, he whispered, "This hand has suffered a lot." My insides grew hot and tears flowed again. No one in my life had ever held my hand like this, Anma. Ji-eun's other hand touched my cheek. As the fingers wiping away my tears brushed against my cheek, I felt like I couldn't breathe. I turned my head to look at Ji-eun, but his eyes were so close. "Yoon-sun, I can't hold back right now." After saying that, Ji-eun averted his gaze and tried to take a step back. Just then, my hand moved first and I gripped Ji-eun's hand tightly. Me too. Ji-eun slowly leaned in and impressed his lip against my forehead. Warmth rested on my trembling, cautious forehead. As I closed my eyes, a tingling sensation ran through my entire body, reaching down to my fingertips as if an electric current. Then his lips slowly moved down from my forehead to the tip of my nose. My breath quickened. I thought I should stop, but my body wouldn't obey, and before I knew it, my hand had climbed onto Ji-eun's chest. It was firm. My palm froze at the thickness. I could feel clearly, even through his shirt. I wanted to meet a 67-year-old. The moment I confirmed through my fingertips what Sun had said, that he had the stamina of a 50-year-old, I felt my heart race behind my ears. Ji-eun's lips finally touched mine. It was our first kiss in 7 years. At first it was cautious and light, but as I didn't pull away, it grew deeper little by little. The sound of waves drifted faintly through the car window, and only the sound of our breathing filled the narrow space. As the kiss lengthened, Jiyeon's hand wrapped around my shoulder, and his firm chest came closer to my back. As the heavy pounding of my heart ran down my spine, I felt something large behind me, and my body froze slightly. As if noticing, Ji-eun slowly pulled away and pressed his forehead against mine. "I'm sorry, I was out of my mind." I shook my head, catching my breath. "You don't have to be sorry." After those words left my mouth, my face felt like it was about to explode. To think I had said such a thing. Silence fell over the car, and the only sound was us both catching our breaths. Ji-eun chuckled softly and called a designated driver. "I'll take you home." Our hands did not let go for the entire hour-long drive back to Seoul. I tried to move my fingers to let go first, but Ji-eun held on with a slight tightening, and I didn't dislike it. The warmth lingering on my lips did not disappear until we arrived in Seoul. After getting out in front of my house, I stood by the front door for a long time. The warmth remaining in my palms, the warmth on my lips, the thickness of the touch on my back. All of it rushed in at once, and I clenched my fist tightly. That night, I couldn't fall asleep under the covers. I opened my phone and saw a text message from Ji-eun. "Thank you for today. Good night." The 2 short sentences shone on the screen, and I pressed that light against my chest and closed my eyes. This shouldn't be happening. He is a chaebol chairman, and I am just a janitor. Yet the warmth remaining on my lips did not fade until dawn. At that very moment, something was happening in a place I was unaware of. It was much later that I realized Chief Secretary Han Ju-young had spread out the chairman's vehicle logs and schedule change records bus, staring intently at the screen. It was the Monday following my return from the sea. After finishing the morning cleaning, I was emptying buckets in the tool room when the door opened and an unfamiliar woman entered. She was dressed in a knee suit with her hair tied up tightly, and she was holding a document envelope in her hand. "You are Miss Kim Yoon-sun, aren't you?" As I nodded, the woman closed the door and took a step closer. He introduced himself as Chief Secretary Han Ju-young, and I had heard from the security office that he was someone who had served the chairman for a long time. "It is out of trust, but may I ask what your relationship is with the chairman?" I tightened my grip on the bucket. Mr. Han Ju-young lightly tapped the envelope and continued, "I heard that he is struggling financially after the passing of his spouse, Bujusa-no. The chairman is a pure-hearted person. I would appreciate if you could maintain boundaries before any misunderstandings arise." I am not a fool, so I understood the hidden meaning behind the phrase pure-hearted person. It meant that someone like you shouldn't approach him. I was seething with anger, but I felt my voice would crack if I opened my mouth, so I just bowed my head once, picked up the bucket, and left. My legs trembled the entire time I walked down the hallway. When I went up to the rooftop that day, Mr. Ji-hoon was waiting with 2 cans of coffee. I sat on the bench, but I couldn't bring myself to open the coffee. Mr. Ji-hoon asked, "Is something wrong?" But I just replied, "Nothing," and fiddled with the cans. Han Ji-young's words kept swirling around in my head. "Please keep your distance before misunderstandings arise." Isn't that right? Is it normal for a janitor to drink coffee on a rooftop with a chaebol chairman, go for a drive to the seaside, or hold hands in a car? When I stood up first, unable to even finish my can of coffee, saying, "I'll be going now," I could see Ji-hoon's face harden. As I turned to leave, my footsteps felt as heavy as lead. That Saturday, I received a call from Jae-hyuk. "Mom, let's meet this time. I have something to tell you." Sitting across from me at the cafe, Jae-hyuk's expression was different from usual. He was gripping the coffee cup so tightly that his fingers turned white, and he looked straight into my face as he spoke. "Mom, what kind of guy are you seeing these days?" I felt like I couldn't breathe. "How did you know?" Jae-hyuk took out his phone and showed me the screen. It was a photo taken by his classmate at a traditional Korean restaurant in Gangneung, and in the background, June and I were faintly captured, sitting side by side. "This is a restaurant where it costs 200,000 won per person. This isn't the time to go there on Mom's salary. Is that guy rich by any chance?" As I couldn't answer, Jae-hyuk's voice rose. I gripped the corner of the table as if holding a spoon, but I couldn't feel my fingertips. What kind of dating is this at Mom's age? What will people around us say? I opened my mouth, but my voice was cracked and only a single word came out. Jae-hyuk stood up from her seat and turned her back, and the sound of the cafe door slamming shut echoed deep into my bones. A coffee cup Jae-hyuk had left half drank lay on the chair, and I stared at it for a long time. When I left the cafe, it was raining. Even though I knew I hadn't brought an umbrella, I just walked. Jae-hyuk's words poured down over my head like raindrops. What kind of dating is this at Mom's age? As I walked, the tip of my nose stung, and something I couldn't tell if it was rainwater or tears streamed down my chin. Back home, I picked up my phone while still wet. I dialed Ji-hoon's name. After 2 rings, I heard a voice. I spoke with trembling lips. "June, let's stop now." A brief silence followed the question. "Why? Did something happen?" I am someone who doesn't deserve to be by your side, June. What would a janitor become with a chaebol chairman?" Yoon Seon hung up the phone, unable to hear the end of his voice. As the phone screen went dark, only my shadow remained on the wet floor. Summer passed. When I left for work, I closed the flooring, put the mop in the tool room, and didn't go up to the rooftop. I didn't even check if there was a can of coffee on the bench. Mi-sun worried, asking, "Hey, what's wrong? You aren't even eating," but I just shook my head. Every night I pulled the covers over my head and cried. I should have kept quiet, but since the studio apartment was thin, I buried my face in the blankets, afraid the neighbors would hear. The memories of standing side by the sea in the west, the hand I held, and the lips that touched my forehead, kept coming back to me, only to be shattered into pieces by what my son had said. It was an evening a little over 10 days later. As I got off work and entered the villa alley, it was raining again. I was walking with my head down when my feet stopped in front of the villa's main gate. A man in a suit was standing there. He had no umbrella, was soaked to the bone, and his shirt clung to his body. Neither his driver nor his secretary were in sight. It was Ji-eun. "Ji-eun, how did you get here?" Ji-eun looked. His eyes visible through his wet hair. "I haven't. No matter how much money I had, sitting alone in the evenings felt suffocating. But since meeting you for the first time, I have looked forward to tomorrow." His voice cracked amidst the sound of the rain. "Please don't push me away." My legs gave way. Unable to stand any longer, I grabbed the gate, but my hand slipped, and I leaned forward. At that moment, Ji-eun rushed over and hugged me. Cold moisture from his wetsuit radiated from me, but the inside was hot. As my face buried in his broad chest, his heart pounded right beside my ear. Right beside my ear. "Fool, what are you doing getting wet?" My voice cracked as if it weren't my own. Ji-eun wrapped her arms around my back and whispered, "Without you, it didn't matter whether I got wet or not." We stood in the alley holding each other in the rain for a long time. I held Ji-eun's hand and opened the front door. "Please come in. We need to change first." Standing in the cramped studio apartment, we were so close that our shoulders were almost touching. I handed her a doll and asked her to dry herself, but while she was drying her hair, her wet shirt remained clinging to her body. I held my breath as I saw the contours revealed through the gap. She said she swims and hikes every day. She had the firmness of someone in their early 50s, not 67. I told her she needed to change her shirt. But before I could even say a word, Ji-eun said, "It's fine, it just needs to dry a bit," and began unbuttoning it one by one. With each 1, 2, 3 button undone, my heart quickened. My jaw dropped as I saw the upper body revealed as the shirt was removed. I remembered what Mi-sun had said. She said the former madam couldn't handle it. She really is amazing. I didn't even realize those words had slipped out of my mouth. Ji-eun stopped and looked at me, and my face felt like it was going to explode, so I turned my head away. Ji-eun slowly approached and picked up a towel. He began wiping the rainwater from my hair, his large hands wrapping around it as he carefully wiped it down strand by strand. I closed my eyes. He had never wiped my hair, not even when my husband was alive. Ji-eun's hand slowly moved from my head to my cheek, and from my cheek down to my chin. "Yoon-sun, may I come a little closer? I shouldn't be doing this. If I do this, I won't be able to go back." But in Ji-eun's eyes, I saw something like the eyes of disaster. The 7-year empty seat, the 3-year empty table, the evenings I had swallowed, alone. Our lips touched. It was a cautious, trembling kiss, like the first one. As the kiss dragged on, my hand moved up onto Ji-eun's bare chest, and I could feel his heavy, firm heartbeat through my entire palm. My body froze when I felt something large behind me. "Ji-eun, this non." Ji-eun tried to step forward, looking embarrassed. My hand grabbed his arm first. "It's okay." We took out a blanket and lay side by side under it. Holding each other's hands tightly, we felt each other's trembling breaths. In the darkness, only the sound of breathing could be heard, and Ji-eun's body heat spread through the blanket to my entire body. I had never felt anything like this in my life. I opened my eyes at dawn. There was someone beside me. The seat on the left filled for the first time in 7 years. A faint light from between the windows settled upon Jiun's sleeping face, and I gazed at him, weeping silently. I didn't know why I was crying, I only felt something frozen solid inside my heart, slowly melting away. That night, for the first time in 7 years, I was not alone. How much time had passed? The light through the window had grown brighter. On the floor of the studio, the suit that had been wet last night was hanging from the back of a chair, drying. I quietly got up and went to the kitchen. There were still some eggs and a tray of rice left in the refrigerator, so I was frying some when Ji-eun woke up at the sound of the oil splattering. "I'll do it." Standing in the cramped kitchen in just a bare shirt, he looked out of place, yet strangely natural. A chaebol chairman flipping eggs in front of a gas stove in a studio apartment. I couldn't help but chuckle. "The chairman, you want fried eggs?" Jian turned around and smiled slightly. I used to do it every day back in the day, too. There was a time when we cooked our own meals on the job site. We sat facing each other at a small table that could hardly be called a dining table and ate fried eggs and rice. It wasn't a fancy traditional Korean restaurant, but a meal eaten in a cramped room. Watching Ji-eun savor each spoonful made the inside of my throat feel warm. After the meal, Ji-eun put down his spoon and looked into my eyes. "Yoon-seon, I have a small villa in Yangpyeong. Would you like to go with me this weekend? The autumn foliage will be beautiful." The hand that had handed me the spoon stopped. The word villa was swirling around in my head, yet. "If the two of us go to a villa, isn't that, well, you know?" I answered, "I'll think about it," but I couldn't hide the fact that my face was flushing. When I told Mi-sun about it at work that day, she reacted as if the emergency stairwell would come crashing down. "Go to the Yangpyeong villa? Right now? Will you ever get another chance like this in your life?" I said, "But if the two of us go to a villa, that is," Mi-sun grabbed my hand tightly and spoke in a low voice, "So what? You're a woman after all. Besides, there are rumors about that guy. Rumors that he's healthy." I shouted, "Ani, I." But Mi-sun added with a serious expression, "Please, buy some new underwear." 3 days have passed since that night we spent together in the studio apartment. In the meantime, I spoke with Ji-eun on the phone twice, but I simply could not get used to the feeling that the back of my ears would burn just from hearing his voice. On Saturday morning, we headed to Yangpyeong in Ji-eun's car. The villa we arrived at was much larger than I had imagined. The mountain slopes stretched out beyond the pass, and red autumn leaves covered the entire garden. "This is the villa," Ji-eun said as he opened the front door. "It's more comfortable than a hotel. Please make yourself at ease." When I entered the living room, there was a fireplace, and the faint scent of burning wood wafted through the air. However, the more beautiful the scenery before my eyes, the smaller a corner of my heart felt. "I don't belong here, Ma." In the afternoon, we walked along the path behind the villa. Fallen leaves rustled underfoot, and Jean walked alongside me slowly, matching my pace. Midway along the path, Ji-eun stopped and took both my hands. "Yoon-son, I have something I want to tell you." My heart raced to the back of my ears. "I will make sure you never have to worry about money for the rest of your life. Please stay by my side. Let's live together." Tears welled up. I tried to hold them back, but my nose stung and they poured out all at once. "Ji-eun, I have nothing. I haven't learned anything. I'm just a janitor." To me, Ji-eun cut me off without letting go of my hand. "What I need isn't a degree or wealth. I just need someone I can say I'm home for the evening." All I could do was nod. "Yes, I want to be by your side too." In the evening, Ji-eun grilled the meat himself, and I set the side dishes. We clinked glasses of wine and sat by side on the sofa by the fireplace. Every time the light flickered, Ji-eun's profile flushed red. add. As he set down the wine glass, Jian whispered, "Yihun-san, take a shower and relax." The villa's bathroom was 3 times the size of a studio apartment bathroom. I turned on the hot water and looked in the mirror, my heart pounding to the brim. What's gonna happen tonight? When I came out after finishing my shower, Jiun was sitting on the bed. I was wearing a cotton shirt, and the moonlight stretched long across the room. Jiun got up and began drying my wet hair with a towel, being careful, strand by strand, just as he had done in the studio. But today, the atmosphere was different. Jiun's hand slowly moved from my head to my shoulder, and from my shoulder to my back. My breath quickened. "You're the first person I've ever met who suits me as well as you do." I turned my head at Jiun's whisper and saw his face right in front of me. The kiss began. It was deeper and more desperate than the one in the studio. With trembling hands, I unbuttoned Jiun's shirt, and I held my breath as I watched his upper body revealed with each unbutton. Under the moonlight, the firmness looked like that of a man in his early 50s, not 67. Jiun carefully laid me down and asked, "Hey, are you okay?" "Yes." We made love on the bed. I was surprised by the size. I realized the rumors that the madam couldn't handle it were true, and couldn't hold back my breath as I let out a gasp. It was the first time in my life I had ever been this wet. It felt like time stopped when we became completely one. It was a deep, long night, so long that I lost track of time. I had never felt this way in my life. Is this what they mean by having great sexual chemistry? After it was over, we lay there holding each other. The sheets were soaked. I buried my face in Jiun's chest and cried, though I didn't know why the tears were coming. I just couldn't believe that I could feel this, that I could enjoy this. Egohai this. Jiun stroked my head and spoke softly. "Thank you." At those words, tears welled up again. When the morning sunlight poured into the room, I got up first and gazed at Jiun's sleeping face. I was getting up to wash quietly when Jiun opened his eyes and grabbed my wrist. "Where are you going?" I was pulled back under the covers. Jiun held me and whispered, "I want to wake up like this every morning." And looking at his firm shoulders in the morning sunlight, I buried my head in embarrassment. "At my age, how can you do this every morning?" Jiun smiled and said, "Mornings are different." After showering together and returning to bed, we made love once again under the covers. If last night was longing, this morning was warmth. Without rushing, as if slowly checking each other's body temperature, twice a day. At this age, something like this, I hugged the blankets and burst into laughter. "I'm not crazy, am I?" Jiun lightly touched the tip of my nose and said, "We're both minahater," and laughter filled the room. As we made and ate breakfast together, I asked, "If we do this every day, will my body be able to handle it?" Jiun replied, "I'll take care of your health," and placed egg uraira on my plate. That morning, I realized what happiness was. In the afternoon, as we were taking another walk around the villa, Jihoon's phone rang. Jihoon answered the call briefly, and his expression hardened for a moment. His voice lowered as he spoke curtly. "What's the problem with that? Don't ever report things like this again." After hanging up the phone, Jihoon composed himself and smiled, but I couldn't miss that fleeting hint of darkness. What was the call about? "It's nothing. Don't worry." Jung forked, holding my hand, but I could feel a faint tremor in her fingertips. Maple leaves were blown by the wind and fell to the ground, and as I stepped on the red leaves, I thought, "Can this happiness last?" I held Jihoon's hand in the car on the way back to Seoul. As streetlights passed one by one outside the window, the flight landed on our hands and then vanished. The thought that this time might also disappear like that light weighed heavily on my heart. I solidified my resolve the day after returning from the villa. I sent a text message to Gio first, telling her I would no longer hide it or run away. My dear daughter, Mom has something to tell you. Can you spare some time? It took a day for a reply to come. Only after she looked at her phone and put it down about 12 times did a short reply arrive. Saturday afternoon. I arrived at the cafe first on Saturday and took a seat. I ordered coffee and wrapped my hand around the paper cup. Even though the heat spread to my palm, my heart felt cold. The glass door opened and Jae-hee walked in. As soon as she sat across from me, she looked straight into my face. I spoke first. Jae, Mom is human too. Jae's eyes wavered slightly. But I didn't stop. Mom is lonely too. I'm happy that you're married and living happily. But Mom has to wake up at dawn alone for the rest of her life, grab a mop and go out. My voice trembled, but I didn't let go of her gaze. Jae just kept her mouth shut and twirled the paper cup. He didn't buy me with money. He was someone who stood in front of my house in the rain. Alone. Jae's finger stopped. He wasn't a chairman. He was just a lonely person. Just like me. For a long time, only the sounds of other customers' voices filled the cafe. Jae lowered her head and spoke in a low voice. Mom, I did it because I was afraid you would get hurt again. You saw how you suffered all alone after Father passed away. I felt a burning sensation deep inside my throat, wondered what would happen if something like that happened to you again. Only then did I realize that this child acted out of worry, not anger. Thank you for your feelings. But Mom will make the decision. You have the right to be happy too. Jae-hyuk sniffled and nodded. He died. Although there were still things left to be done to call it a complete reconciliation, at least the door had opened. The following week, Jiun spoke to me. I want to meet Jae-hyuk. I want to get my son's permission. I held out my hand and said no. It might be too much for you, but Ji-hoon quietly shook his head. Because I am a father too. I understand a son's heart. I later heard from Jae-hyuk that the two of them sat across from each other at a quiet Korean restaurant. They said Jiun was the first to speak. I too like your mother. It is because I like that person. I will make you comfortable for the rest of your life. Jae-hyuk reportedly asked, Are you sincere? Ji-hoon replied, I would bet my entire fortune on it. I heard that he sat there in silence for a long time, before finally bowing his head and saying just one thing, please take good care of Mother. As I listened to that story, my hand gripping the phone trembled. My voice was cracking and breaking, and I too covered my mouth and sobbed silently. This happened a few days later at Ji-hoon's office. Chief Secretary Han Ju-hyung knocked on the door and came in. Ji-hoon told me this story later, but she said Han Ji-hyung basic man bowed deeply and said, Chairman, I crossed the line. I apologize, Ji-hoon. Han Ju-hyung paused for a moment, then replied, Understood, Chairman. It was only after hearing that I asked Kuti-hosked. Why did Han Ju-hyung suddenly change her mind? Ji-hoon smiled and said, Ms. Ju-hyung said that when she came to the villa in Yangpyeong to make a call regarding documents, she saw you organizing my pillbox and making a dosage schedule. She said she realized it then, that this person isn't after money. The moment I heard this story about the mailbox, my face flushed hot. It was something I had done in secret, yet to think someone was watching. It was my last day working at the building. While organizing rags in the tool room, I told Mi-soon, I'm thinking of quitting this job. Mi-soon put down a bucket and looked at me. Her eyes turned red instantly, and she gave me a slap in the face. Finally, it works out, you idiot. Then she grabbed my hand, her voice cracking. Hey, what am I supposed to do? Who am I going to eat ramen with for lunch? I choked up at those words and hugged Misun. I could smell the emergency stares. The smell of sweat, detergent, and cup ramen, mixed together the smell that had lingered for 7 years. Thank you for everything, Ani. If it weren't for you, I really wouldn't have been able to endure it. Misun patted my back and said, "Don't come up." I said, "I'm tearing up too," but my shoulders were already wet. The two of us went up to the rooftop. Sitting side by side on the bench where I first drank canned coffee, with Ji-un, Misun, and I opened the last can of coffee. Misun looked up at the sky and said, "Someday, I'll open a tteokbokki place too. Come visit. You'll definitely do it, right?" It's a promise. We sat on the rooftop until the canned coffee grew cold. That evening, I stepped into Ji-hoon's home in Seoul for the first time. As the front door opened, the Han River came into view beyond the spacious living room. My feet wouldn't move, so I stood in front of the door with my shoes off, but Ji-hoon returned and took my hand. "This is our home now. Our home." The moment those two words fell into my heart, tears poured down. For 7 years I had been muttering, "I've been here," from the entrance of my studio apartment toward an empty room. Now I was finally able to say those words to someone. We went together to the rooftop of the building where we first met. Sitting side by side on the bench, we took sips of canned coffee. "This is where I first met Yoon Seon, isn't it? You said it is the greatest luck of my life," and I lifted my can of coffee and replied, "Me too." That night, we stood in a spacious bedroom overlooking the night view of the Han River. Ji-hoon hugged me from behind and whispered, "Don't be nervous. Don't be nervous. We can do this every day now." Turning around, I hugged Ji-hoon first. "Thank you, Ji-hoon, for coming into my life." The kiss began. Unlike the night at the villa, we didn't rush. We made love slowly, but this time it wasn't desperation, but relief. The fact that this person who hugs me several times a day is now by my side every day. I had never met anyone like this in my life. "We will do this every day from now on," Ji-hoon whispered, and I smiled. Neat. Every day? Will I be able to endure it? Every day as long as I am healthy. We lay side by side against the backdrop of the Han River. Night view, and the light reflected on the window pane was swaying like waves above the ceiling. If I had longed for the moonlight at the villa, the light on this night felt like a promise. "Ji-hoon, I am happy." Instead of answering, Ji-hoon gripped my hand tightly, and that grip traveled from my palm all the way to my chest. I realized I was no longer alone. That night, I felt what it meant to be home even at a late age. 3 months have passed since we started living together. It took surprisingly long to get used to the simple fact that there was someone beside me every morning when I opened my eyes. This was because the habit of waking up alone to the alarm in my studio apartment for 7 years was deeply ingrained in me. One morning I was startled awake, thinking the seat next to me was empty, only to breathe a sigh of relief after hearing Ji-hoon snort as she brewed coffee in the kitchen. "Good morning." Ji-hoon entered the bedroom holding 2 cups of coffee. The aroma of coffee filled the room, and the morning sunlight streaming in from the direction of the Han River lay long over my mouth. As I accepted the cup and took a sip, a warm sensation traveled down my throat, and I felt my body slowly relaxing. It was a completely different temperature from the canned coffee I used to drink alone in my studio. "Good morning." Sitting side by side, drinking coffee and looking out the window, this time was the best part of the day. Walking along the Han River became a daily routine. After finishing breakfast and putting on my sneakers, Ji-hoon would be waiting at the entrance, and as we walked side by side, feeling the river breeze, I felt at ease even without much conversation. When Ji-hoon would suddenly blurt out, "You look ready today," as we walked, I would swat his arm with the back of my hand and read "Rotu yokurat lying too." Although I felt embarrassed, I couldn't stop the corners of my mouth from curving upward. For the first time in my 58 years of life, I realized that these small exchanges could warm up the day. One Saturday, I visited Misun's snack shop. She had opened a small shop in an alley near a building about a month prior, and the moment I saw the sign that read Mison's Teokbogi, my nose tingled. It was because the words I had spoken on the emergency stairs that I would open a teokbogi shop someday had actually come true. When I opened the door, Mison was standing there wearing an apron. Seeing me, she spread her arms wide and shouted, "You're here?" When Ji-eun bowed behind me to greet me, Mison quickly stepped aside, making a muss and saying, "Oh, my chairman, please sit here." We sat three at a small table and ate teokbogi. As Mi In-sun scooped more broth for Ji-eun, she spoke to her casually. "You have to make sure Yoo Han-sun doesn't cry. You would be shocked if you knew how much Hey cried." Ji-eun put down her chame and quietly nodded head. Mi-sun took my hand and lowered her voice. "Yoon-sun, thanks to you, my life has changed too." Teokboki broth splashed onto the back of my hand, but instead of wiping it away, I just gripped Mi-sun's hand tightly. It was when the holidays were approaching. I received a call from my daughter-in-law. Her voice was softer than before, having passed the Suhak mark. "Mom, can we visit this holiday?" "With Sujin." Sujin was the name of my daughter-in-law. My hand holding the phone trembled slightly at the words that my daughter-in-law, who had never once come with us for the holidays since we got married, would be coming. On the morning of the holiday, I was in the kitchen frying pancakes. The sound of splattering oil and the savory aroma filled the spacious kitchen. It felt like a different world from the holidays I used to spend alone boiling ramen in my old studio apartment kitchen. When the doorbell rang, I left my apron behind me and ran out. I was standing right here. My daughter-in-law, Sujin, was standing beside me, holding a box of sweets, and she paused for a moment when she saw June standing behind her. Just as tension was building, she spoke, "Father, please stay healthy." My hand, which had been holding the ladle in the kitchen, stopped. "Father." My daughter-in-law called Ji-hoon father. I could see the corners of Jun's eyes turning red, and I covered my eyes with my apron in the corner of the kitchen. I felt like I shouldn't let a sound escape, so I kept my mouth shut tight, but my shoulders kept shaking. We sat at the table at 4 o'clock and ate. When my sister handed side dishes to Ji-eun and Sujin said, "Mother, the pancakes are delicious," the hand holding the chopsticks tightened and loosened repeatedly. I had dreamed of a holiday like this for 7 years, and I realized that dreams can suddenly become reality just like this. Of course, not everything was perfect. When I accompanied Ji-hoon to his business meetings, I would occasionally hear whispers saying, "I heard he used to be a janitor." I have sharp hearing, so I didn't miss it, but every time that happened, a corner of my heart ached. However, when Ji-eun held my hand tightly and whispered, "You are my person," that pain turned into warmth. One day, Chief Secretary Han Ju-young called. "Madam Chairman, the health checkup results are in. All the numbers are good." The very person who told me to please keep the line in the tool room when we first met was now calling me Madam and reporting on the chairman's health. "Thank you, Ju-young," I replied, and I heard laughter coming from beyond Suhak and Suhak. I realized once again that the distance between people can shrink like this in the face of time and sincerity. One evening, the two of us went up to the rooftop of a building. We sat side by side on the bench where we first drank canned coffee. The vending machine was still there, and the paint on the bench had peeled off a little more. I opened 2 cans of coffee and handed one to Ji-eun. The scenery was exactly the same as it was back then, yet everything had changed. After taking a sip of her coffee, Ji-eun said, "Yoon-sun, I'm sorry we met so late. It would have been better if we had met sooner." I shook my head. "No, it's fine. This moment is perfect right now. Because there were times when I was hurting and lonely, this moment is even more precious." It was sincere. Her husband's light, the child she raised alone, the marble floor she scrubbed every dawn, the nights she cried in her empty studio apartment. If it weren't for all those times, she wouldn't have known the weight of the warmth she feels on that bench right now. Jiyeon took my hand. As I weaved through my fingers just as I had caught it in the sea the first time, the sun was setting beyond the rooftop, and I could see the sky turning from orange to red and then to purple. I would like to pause here and say something to those of you listening to this story, Hidakori. In my 58 years of life, I realized for the first time that it is okay to lean on someone. I learned that love is not about age but courage. Money, social set, and the gaze of others were all just excuses. It was not the world that had kept its door closed, but myself. If, while listening to this, there are any of you who wake up alone at dawn like me, if there are those who sit at an empty table filling the silence with the sound of the television, or if there are those who have locked the door of their hearts thinking, what is the point at my age? Please open it. A love like the sunset might still be waiting for you, just as it was for me. I came down from the building rooftop and walked along the Han River. At sunset, the river was dyed with the colors of the setting sun, and the shadows of two people walking side by side stretched out long. Ji-eun held my hand as we walked, and I rested my head on her shoulder. I'm back. Having someone to say those words to now, that was the greatest gift in my life. That warmth was truly heartwarming. This concludes my story, Kim An-sun. If you enjoyed this story, please watch other videos, Bishkos. Liking, subscribing, and setting notifications are free. Also, if there are any scenes that resonated with you, please share them in the comments. Your words can deeply touch others.